Does awareness and quiet have a place in your home?
Have you met me?
It can be really easy to get lost in the noise, especially with young children in the home.
Or loud husbands?
Or loud husbands. We did an experiment when our kids were 4, 6, and 9 on silence. And it was pretty eye-opening and definitely made us all more aware in our home.
Mama says namaste. Mama says namaste.
Making a family can be easy and fun.
Oh, yeah, but raising a family can be a whole different story.
From spouses to kids to the crazy daily grind, life often directs us away from connection and more into reactive chaos.
If you're tired of that cycle and are seeking something beyond the picket fence blues, this is the show for you.
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Nathan.
And we're here to take you from chaos to clarity by bringing awareness and intention into your home, not waiting for one day, and highlighting how
the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us.
Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.
So this experiment on silence was kind of an interesting one. We kind of approached it haphazardly.
Yes. So I'm revitalizing an episode that we did. I think it was episode 20, way back in the beginning. Do you know that we are on episode 314 right now?
Once we hit 333, we'll decide whether we'll stop, go, or move forward.
There we go. We like those matching digits a lot. Yeah. We're always in our household going, it's 111, I love you. It's 333, I love you. It's 555, I love you.
I can't wait because our truck's mileage is at 333,000. And once it gets to 333, I've got to try to catch a picture. If I miss it, I'm going to be so disappointed.
Yeah. Okay. So
anyway, on to why we have to work on silence.
Right. So exactly. So we love to talk in our house, and we have a lot of conversation going.
And we were talking before about how we started this experiment haphazardly with our kids several years ago on the 20th episode.
Right. And so so we wanted to kind of bring this back up because we're ready to do this again as our family as well, and thought this was a great opportunity for us to share some of those tips and the lessons that we learned. So yeah, back when it was in 2017, and our kids were 4, 6, and 9 years old. And we had just listened to, we'd been reading a lot and doing a lot of contemplation and meditation and experimenting with silence ourselves as adults. And we heard this podcast episode on quiet. And it was a TED Radio Hour. And it was this beautiful one on quiet and just soaking in the sounds of silence and the impact that it was.
Yeah. And it was fun because it challenged this idea of, just being quiet. Like I have always felt like I needed to fill the air. And I know that that's been something you struggle with as well, Miss Ashley. And so, we were kind of intrigued by this idea. What's the opposite of us? What does that feel like? Well, we did it once.
And this is coming from a family where, we were walking narrators from the times our kids were young. And all 3 of our children had to be moved up in their preschool classes because they were such fast talkers, and their kids and the other kids were they would get frustrated with the other kids for not being able to carry on a fast full
paced
rich conversation with them. So we knew, we're not hurting on the talking arena here. Let's try the other side.
And so we sat and we spent 8 hours, 6 hours?
Well, we woke up in the morning, and this was hard for me because we did not inform the kids on what we were doing. We just woke up one day and stopped talking, and we were silent for the day. And again, 4, 6, and 9, there's some frustration there. And, as I was writing the blog post that goes along with this, I was thinking about that and like how that was a struggle for me to not just explain it because, for everything I do, we're talking about the why behind it and what it is we're doing and why we're doing it and all of this stuff. And we're explaining so much to our kids. For me not to do that was really hard.
Right. Don't pad the books. Let them figure out what's going on.
Well, and that's the thing. The reality is in life, we oftentimes aren't prepared for things that are coming our way. We don't have our parents that are sitting over us as adults saying, now this is what to expect and this is why we're doing it and this is how to prepare yourself for it. And so sometimes we are faced with things, we got to figure out how we're going to navigate it. And so this was an opportunity for us to do it with our kids. Silence does not mean we shut off love. We just stopped the verbal diarrhea that was going on in our home.
And it was really pleasant. We went to the park and played at the park, and we walked, and we sat in the morning. We ate breakfast together and had lunch together, and we started to figure out how to communicate with each other in other ways.
Right. So here are a few lessons that we learned with this, and then we'll move into tips for awareness and what tips we have taken as kind of gold standards for our house now that are guidelines we like to work through. So the first lesson that we learned in this is that oftentimes a child is going to mimic what you do. Remember, monkey see, monkey do. So if you're embracing the quiet, you're going to have your child more likely to embrace the silence as well. So when you're minimizing your words, lowering your voice, and pausing more, that's oftentimes what your child is going to do. And the opposite is true as well. When you are talking really fast, raising your voice, and putting in a lot of words, your child's going to be mimicking that. So the first thing is this monkey see, monkey do. It's amazing how quickly our children started to reflect our behavior. Mm-hmm. And I have seen that so many times in our lives, both good and bad.
Right. That's very true. Usually a great tidbit of parenting advice is if there's something your child is doing that you really don't like, look at yourself first and see how they're mimicking you.
Right.
And then you can try to play with that first before you're like, oh, you should be more quiet.
That's the reality I've talked with the girls about, is they're even with their frustrations with friends, so often the things that they're the most frustrated about are the things they struggle with themselves.
It's true for all of us.
Right.
So the second one is when those that are usually controlling the conversation with, filling in the gaps, when they're quiet, it opens up this rare space that we don't always tap into that allows those that have been quiet to kind of speak up and have a little more communication. And so it's an interesting thing when the whole energy changes. It leaves space for so much more. When you take those words out, it can leave a whole lot of room for other things to come in.
Yeah, and we've found that allowing for the quiet, now obviously not in our straight quiet experiment where nobody was talking, but when we pulled back and we allowed for more quiet, it gave that space, and we had conversations later on that we never would have had, just because we had allowed more space for those to process and speak their thoughts where they didn't have a chance to get a word in edgewise otherwise.
And we live in a household where everybody is competing to get their perspective across.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we can get into just a groove of that, and it's important to try something new and just play with, okay, what happens if we aren't those characters today? That doesn't be forever, just today.
Right, and that went into the next one. How often do we feel the pressure to answer and respond to every single thing? Sometimes we have kids that are just asking questions just to talk, just to hear their own voice. They don't really care for the answer. They aren't really paying attention anyway. Or they ask it, and then they answer it themselves. Like they can actually figure it out on their own. So
Or how often do we as parents turn that question around and ask, well, what do you think about that? How do you think it works? And they may know and they may not know. And you can see their little intelligent wheels turning.
Right. And so when we were quiet and we didn't have any of that conversation going on, it was amazing to see how much more self-sufficient our children were, how much they figured out what worked and what didn't, and what, or what things they really needed to ask questions for.
So after this experiment, we started to kind of notice that it opened up some pathways in our children's minds to be willing to stay in that space for a little bit longer. And so the next day, things were a little chiller, a little quieter. There was less fighting. There was almost more space and appreciation for each other. And, it's a great reminder that, sometimes we need those reminders in life. Just everybody does, that we've gotten so mm-hmm. I've said this to friends on Facebook that, have kind of gotten lost in the political spectrum of things. Like, man, I love your passion there, but there's so much to this world to be passionate about other than just the politics.
The things that divide us.
The things that divide us. And so, it opens up that space once we turn that noise off for a little while. It's interesting to see what fills in that area.
Yeah, it does. We had less demands. We had more quiet play. It kind of changed the vibe a bit when we started to open that up. And we realized another lesson here that less is more. There was a lot of talking done that was unnecessary. You know, we as parents learned to lecture less and to listen more, and being okay with not having everything resolved, just allowing us all to sit with our own thoughts a little bit. We encouraged it in other ways as well. We looked at how can we have connection with silence. You know, we added in the power of positive, non-sexual physical touch. I mean, how much are you touching your kids, loving on your kids, and helping them understand, you know, what positive physical touch is, in a way that, you know, that helps them to know their boundaries and what they're comfortable with and not. I mean, in that arena, I know that I have one kiddo that would be in my lap constantly and another kiddo that really appreciates her space. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I recognize that and I give touch and love and affection to both of them, yet in different ways.
Right.
Another was just our conversations are just such a deep way to connect. And, yet when we hold back and we observe and we kind of notice before plunging forward, it helped our conversations to be richer because we were assessing kind of the energy of the person before we even got into the conversation, and that makes such a difference.
Well, and we were being more intentional, I think. You know, that silence brought that intentionality of, well,
right.
What's the value of this word, or am I just saying something to say something? We'll even challenge our girls on that. Now it's like, is what you're saying, is it something you really want to share with us, or are you just excited about the idea or something? You know,
right. We use that acronym THINK, you know, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it informative? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And boy, if we can run through that on the things that we say, we recognize there's a lot of stuff where that's just filler, or it's unnecessary, or it's just being a criticism, or something that's not really adding to or helping us to go forward.
Right.
And then another aspect of it with the silence is just, you know, being willing to like sit and look in each other's eyes. I mean, there was an art experiment of that where people would sit for 2 minutes and look into each other's eyes, and people would just break down in tears because there's such a vulnerability there and so much emotion and connection that can be conveyed in pure silence, just looking into each other's eyes.
Right.
And, you know, have you experimented with that with your children and with your partner? Yeah,
I mean, it's a great thing to do with all of the family, I think.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a chance just to connect and just realize that there's another soul over there. It's not something you're trying to manipulate or control. They're trying to live life as fully as you are.
Yeah.
And, you know, how to try to figure out to do that in a co-collaborative way is pretty juicy.
Yeah. Yeah, and during this time, as you were going through all of this, you were raising little nature scouts.
Yes.
So you were reading the book, The Way of the Scout.
The Way of the Scout, the education of Little Tree, I think.
Yeah, and The Way of the Scout is a Native American path to finding spiritual meaning in a physical world. And it's not a kid book. You were just reading it, sharing parts of the message with the girls.
Yeah. I should read that book again with them.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, I would like to read that book again. I know. We're back in our hometown area here. We may have to go shopping in our bookstore in our storage and find it. Yeah, but in there, you know, they learned about scatter vision and how to see more while focusing on less. And, you know, that was such a great principle for us to even bring into, you know, also scatter communication, you know, how to communicate and connect more while saying less.
Well, and Twitter kind of pushed us into that realm.
Yeah.
In a way, from a technological standpoint.
Not us technically, since
Not
we are
me.
never on Twitter,
but but the idea,
yes,
I like.
The idea of being succinct with your words and looking at what's really worth the message if you only have a short amount of time to say it or a short amount of space to say it.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so with all of those, I mean, those were just some of the lessons that we learned by doing a quiet experiment. I mean, it may be fun for you to try an experiment of quiet in your home and see what comes of it, what fruit comes, and how hard it is for you.
Yeah, I mean, and you might be surprised who has a tough time with it and who doesn't.
Right. So how do we foster awareness at home? The first thing that we have to do is simply to bring awareness to what is. So that's why going silent and having the quiet is so valuable here. Because if as long as you're going, you're missing things. So when you stop and stay still, you silence your mind, you silence your actions, your emotions, you can start to pay attention to what is, and that can bring awareness to what you like, what you don't like, what you might be able to change. So we created some serious guideposts to walk us through how to bring more awareness into our home. And the first one is when you walk into a room, you come in silently. That is a biggie we really have worked on with the whole family, because I have been just as guilty of walking into a room in mid-sentence. Like I'm walking into the room going ahead, okay, guys, and I have not even paid attention to what else is going on. You know, the fact that Nathan and Clara were in a deep conversation and Ellie was reading her book and Juliet was practicing her lines from Matilda or whatever. You know, if I am unaware, I can come in and I can get really mad that nobody's been listening to me. Well, did I ever take a chance to look and see whether I'd interrupted where they were at, if I had waited and checked the energy in the room?
And I'm bad about this as a parent because you
I
kind
guess
of
you
want...
can see we're both guilty of this.
Right, we're both like, "Rah, demand the attention, get it." I mean, we were preschool teachers, so it's kind of like in our DNA to just open up the door and start yelling thoughts and concepts. But then you realize that your kids copy that.
Exactly.
And I don't like being treated like that, especially when they're little adults. And so now you kind of recognize that impact and how it changes things and how important it is to be aware of that impact.
It's so
just
true.
Playing with it. Like, you don't know what it's like until you jump on the other side.
Right. And out of respect for our children, I'm going to give them the respect of their space to not just barge in at any time just because I'm the parent. Because again, based on what we talked about last week, when we're fostering little humans here. I mean, there's not a switch that's flipped from kid to adult other than a legal age where they are considered an adult. But when do they change into that maturity? It's how we're helping to develop and foster that. And so part of that is mutual respect. It's not just us as parents demanding it from our children. We give it to our children. So I owe it to my family as part of our family mission, with it being about respect and having respect in our family vision statement. My family deserves my respect. And that means when I walk into a room, I pause before I speak and I read the room. What is going on? What's the energy in the room? Who's paying attention? Who is not? And how am I going to introduce what it is that I want to say into the room in a way that's respectful of where people are?
Right. And our next tip is after you have introduced your thought, sit back and listen and, enjoy the reciprocity of conversation. If you're the one carrying the conversation, sometimes, that can be okay if nobody is engaging or bored. But if you find yourself always carrying the conversation, then it may be okay for a little bit of silence. Sometimes we can compete or we can accidentally compete for that dead space. I know I've had conversations with people where they've dominated the conversation, and I haven't really felt like I've had a chance to say much, and they didn't really ask many questions. It was just me asking questions, and that's perfectly normal. But the more you are kind of completing those thoughts, and instead of competing with each other, it makes for a much more seamless conversation, a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, our kids are oftentimes privy to being ignored and pushed out of conversation, where you have a bunch of adults that are talking over the kids and not acknowledging the kids or their voice. We really try to intentionally make space for our children to allow them to speak, and they do a great job of speaking up. Part of it is us as parents helping to guide the conversation too, and stopping. I did this yesterday where Clara had something to say and she started to say it, and then an adult started talking over her, and I stopped. I looked at her and I said, "What was it that you were saying, Clara?" And I helped to give her an opportunity and space for her voice. There are times that you're just talking with somebody who just likes to hear their own voice, and we've gotten to recognize that. So, think about what do you want to be seen as? Do you want to be seen as that you just want to hear your own voice, or do you want to be seen for the wisdom in your words? And the more you can give space and honor others as a two-way conversation, not a monologue, the better. All right. Another one on this is, for every complaint, come up with 5 positives that you're grateful for right at this very moment. When we were little, when the kids were little, and when I was little, it was one of my favorite books, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day by Judith Forst. And I loved that book. And if you read it, you will see how every single step of his day confirmed that it was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Mm-hmm. He started off on the wrong side of the bed, and he continued to feed that negativity all day long. Things went wrong.
Yep.
And that's so true. I mean, what we think, we become. The more you speak it, the more it becomes your reality. So think about what you are attracting and think of how you can counteract. It doesn't mean you ignore and you deny negatives in your life. I mean, we have it, and we have feelings that we don't want to sit in. But that doesn't mean you ignore it. It doesn't mean I'm never sad or I'm never mad or frustrated or anything else. I am all of those things, oftentimes, multiple times during the day.
Well, I mean,
but then I move on.
That gets us to our next point is, you have the right to feel lots of emotions, but hooking your entire ethos into one of those emotions can kind of be a fool's errand, because we are so multifaceted that, I'm not the same Nathan every single day. I show
part of the adventure.
That's part of the adventure. and so, as you're, kind of moving through, allowing yourself to not dwell on those feelings or kind of run down that rabbit hole of storytelling around they did this or I felt this and nobody appreciated this. And, that's just a wheel that will just kind of grind in your stomach or chest, kind of where I carry my stuff there. Mm-hmm. And catching yourself and pulling yourself all of that off of that wheel and just appreciating the present moment, appreciating the fact that you have, if you have legs and hands that work, that works, that, you can see, you can breathe, you can smell, you can taste. If all those things are working for you, that is something to be so grateful for, and really kind of brings you down to gratefulness.
Exactly. And we want to look at learning new things from anyone we meet. So when we are being more aware, we tend to notice a lot. And that means that, our kids, they notice a lot of what they don't want. The actions of others that they don't want to see in their own lives or they don't want to be a part of. I mean, our kids have had some harsh realities over the last few years of our travels and adventures of seeing kids acting in ways that they decided they didn't want, and adults, that they decided they didn't want to emulate. We believe the world is our school and everyone is our teacher. We have the opportunity to learn all the time. And so when there is a negative in any way, whether that's something, wrong, bad that happened to us or a frustrating person that we're navigating, we think of, what does this make possible? What can we learn from this that can help us to move forward and choose better than this feeling that I'm frustrated with right now?
Right. Another thing that we've kind of fallen out of, that's a great practice, and a lot of families do this kind of subconsciously in some ways, is observing a moment of silence or having space that is held sacred for silence. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't, it's just like anything in our life. If we don't pack in intentional time with our relationships, then it's not just always going to magically happen.
Right.
And so if you're not intentionally, finding silence or creating space for quiet, then it's never going to show up in your life. And so, one of the things we like to do is typically in the morning, and we've fallen out of it again, but, quiet and reading and, or I have fallen out of it. Ashley's glaring.
I'm not glaring at you. I am simply acknowledging
my words. Yes, as everybody has reminded me, I haven't had a good book that I wanted to read. So whatever.
That's what it is. We'll find you a book.
Yeah, and I've been preoccupied with mechanical things.
Yes, truth.
At any rate, but you see how quickly we can make excuses of, this is why I haven't, which is, well, here's why I should.
And then there's another, and there's a justification of where you're at, even if you have it, and even if, for example, you have a very good justification. You're working on AC on a truck and it's blazing hot out, and you got to take advantage of the morning time. Understandable, and it doesn't mean that now that's your excuse moving forward. You've said, okay, so now I want to get back into it.
Right.
We always have that opportunity to reset and get back into it. And yeah, the morning time has been a great time for us to kind of allow for the silence. Another thing that is super common is doing this around dinner time or meal times. A lot of families, if you're religious, you may be doing a prayer before your meal. And that prayer is a time for you to sit and give gratitude. Even if you are not religious, what if you took 2 minutes or 1 minute of silence before you ate just to simply sit in gratitude? Or you go around in a circle and you talk about something that you're grateful for. I mean, we did that practice a lot when our kids were younger. And before we would eat the meal, we'd go around in a circle and say something we were grateful for. And it was so helpful that the kids would remind us if we missed that and let us know about it. And, so we're at a point right now where our meals have been kind of very haphazard, considering it's too hot to eat most of the time.
The joy of cooking has been stripped from us because of the heat.
Right. Now it's like a smoothie and hummus when we can.
Yeah.
And so so it's kind of shifted out, and we're at a point where we're ready to bring that back in. I'd like to add some more of that in as we now have more AC and a little bit cooler in our home, and we can handle that a little bit more.
Well, and in my experience, like getting back to down to this last point, all of these points are kind of bringing us, and we all kind of get out of this zone of presence where we get in this mode of future doing and acting and being, which is amazing and important. And just as equally important is that moment of taking in the presence, the present moment of somebody else, listening to what they're having to say rather than thinking about your rebuttal. Those sorts of mind tricks. The only person that's going to know you're doing it is you. You don't get accolades for being present, other than people will ask you, "Oh man, you seem like you're really chill," or "What's changed with you?" But being present is just an act where, whenever I'm feeling taken away by my emotions, that's where I try to jump. Once I recognize, oh man, I'm starting to watch the movie again. I need to watch what's right here. There's 2 screens. There's one on my eyes and one behind my eyes. And so, just being aware of that can really make a big difference.
Yeah. My mom has a friend who says she'll wait to worry. And I love that.
Not me. I hate that idea, but I agree with it.
Yes. It's
hard for me to wait to worry because I worry about a lot of stuff.
Anxiety draws your attention to an illusion. It's something you have created. It is not necessarily something that is there. And so that's where, and I had this as our mantra for a while, especially as you, Nathan, were navigating anxiety issues. We had this printed off at our house. Anxiety merely draws your attention to an illusion. You are here. You are present. You are home. Mm-hmm. And keeping that as a reminder, I am here, I am present, I am home. And cultivating the feeling of what you want that to be starts to make it happen, starts to bring that fruit out from you. Again, your family will reflect some of the energy that you're bringing in. So what are you personally bringing into it?
And don't let it be anxious energy.
So there are a lot of what we say signposts in our lives. And a signpost is not the clear direction. It's not saying this is the only way to go. It's simply a signifier of there's something I might be able to learn from here or a direction I may choose to go from here. And so we need to look for what those signposts are in our lives. And we miss a lot of them when we're unaware. Same as speeding down the road with blinders on. You're not going to see the sign that says, detour, bridge out ahead or whatever. You want to look at what those signs so that you can recognize with that information, what are you going to do from here?
Yeah.
And so there are lots of different ways to get information. And there may be people that you interact with where they drive you crazy. And yet there's some beautiful lesson that you can learn from them. There are going to be books that you read, people that you listen to, famous people or whatever, where there are elements that really frustrate you or that you don't necessarily appreciate about a person, but then they say something that really can be a reminder for you or kind of sit home with you to help you be a better person. So we're big on not putting anybody or anything or any one practice on a pedestal, but taking things with a grain of salt and seeing what really applies to you in your life for the good. What good can you bring out of this experience, this knowledge, this insight, this awareness that can add to the good in you that then ripples out?
Yeah, because that's that momentum, that energy that, like, once you're expressing that, then those around you are expressing it, and it becomes this nice compounding situation that you can find yourself in.
That's right. So our challenge for you is to try this quiet experiment in your home. Start instilling a few of these lessons on awareness and see what a difference it may make. There are lots of ways. I recommend, as far as parenting books, a good one that kind of starts with this is Simplicity Parenting. And The Danish Way of Parenting is my favorite. We've done a whole episode on that one. So those are 2 books I recommend. And I have links to all of this. I have graphics with some of the quotes that we've shared. I have all of that on the blog that goes along with this. And that's just on the homepage of Mama Says Namaste this week alongside this episode, which is episode 314. So, look for where in your life you may bring more quiet and bring more awareness in. And it may help to allow some of your less vocal family members to really step into their greatness as you make more space for them to show up. And in making more space for them to show up, you may be pulling back on some of the resentment for those who may not feel they have as much of a voice. I mean, there's so many things that can happen as a ripple effect when we start to work from the inside out on what we can do to show up as best as we can for ourselves and for this world. And it allows us to celebrate how
The uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
2, 3. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be free. Namaste in your heart. Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama Says Namaste.